Welcome, everyone. This is the distinguished webinar series organized by the New England Chinese American Alliance, also known as NECAA. I'm Le Ying, Secretary of the NECAA Board and the moderator for tonight's event. For those of you who's attending our event for the first time, just very quick intro. NECAA is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020 that focuses on promoting civic engagement, increasing political awareness, and advocating political participation amongst the Chinese communities. The ultimate goal is to promote social responsibilities and to improve the political caliber of Chinese Americans. Well, many of you might already have a big question mark now in your head, which reads how? Quite frankly, that's a question we're exploring ourselves, and the very reason we're having our honorable guest speaker, Mr. Pham, tonight speaking to us. Just as the famous philosopher Immanuel Kant once said, experience without theory is blind, but theory without experience is more intellectual play. So perhaps the best way to answer the question is to hear from someone who has the very experience serving critical political roles in the government and at the same time has a very active philanthropic life. So without further ado, please allow me to welcome Xia Ming, President of the Flat World Foundation and a member of the NECAA board, to introduce our honorable guest speaker, Mr. Pham. As always, we will have a dedicated Q&A session after Mr. Pham's speech. So please submit your questions into the Q&A box whenever you feel like it. Xia Ming, please, over to you.
Thank you, Grace. Hello, everyone. This is Xia Ming and Ben. The election day is around the corner. Now, the hot topic is whom to vote and how to make your voting decision. As an Asian American, we consider who will represent our interest better. And not just during the election session, we want to constantly learn and practice to make our voice heard and heard better. How to pursue a career at the government? Any other potential ways? Around the country, some bills to collect more demographic data of Asians have been proposed and opposed. A trend of changing some top public schools from merit admission to merit lottery is also ongoing. It's our great honor to have Mr. Nam Pham speak with our community. Nam is the first Asian American and the first Vietnamese American in many fields of the public sector. His experiences is firsthand and precious. This is a great opportunity to learn from such a trailblazer. Since 2015, Nam has joined the Baker Polito administration as Assistant Secretary of Business Development and International Trade, the first Asian American who had ever been a gubernatorial appointee at this level in Massachusetts. He oversaw the Mass Film Office, Mass Office of Business Development, Mass Office of Travel and Tourism, Mass Supports Marketing Office, and the Mass Office of International Trade and Investment. That was the time Nam and I met. Flat World Foundation invited Nam to give a keynote speech at our Business Globalization Forum. It was at Boston Convention and Exhibition Center, BCEC. That was the time when people could still meet and shake hands without wearing masks. I'm so delighted to be able to have Nam again tonight at the NECAA's event. Now, Nam has served as the director of MassDOT's Office of Real Estate and Asset Management since February of this year. This was right before the lockdown. Like most other parts of the society, I imagine it will be quite a challenge. Before the government positions, Nam was the CEO of Vietnamese American Initiative for Development Incorporation from 2011 to 2015. It was the first Vietnamese community corporation in the US. Nam had also been a banking executive, working for more than 20 years in both international commercial banks and the community banks such as Bank Boston, later on Bank of America, and the Asian American Bank. From 1994 to 2000, Nam was the commissioner of Massachusetts Office for refugees and immigrants. He was the first Vietnamese American who served under President Ronald Reagan as the Presidential Management Fellow in 1983. He also taught at Tufts University on Vietnam War, and the U.S. refugee immigration policy. He has served on various boards. He co-founded Van Long Vietnamese language centers in Boston, serving 400 youth per year for the past 20 years. Currently, he is a founding member of Massachusetts Asian American Political Action Committee and the Boston Police Foundation. Since 2015, he has been chairing both the boards of Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation and the Mass Venture, a quasi-public venture capital firm. He also created and hosted a Vietnamese English TV cable show for Boston between 2010 and 2015. Nam earned his bachelor's degree in business administration from University of Minnesota and MPA in political economy from Harvard Kennedy School. Those were impressive and inspiring accomplishments. Nam, thank you so much for the opportunity for us to know more about you and your opinions and suggestions. Welcome. The mic is yours now.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's always a pleasure for me to have a chance to talk to my Asian friends. So I greatly appreciate your invitation, as well as Grace, very graceful host to have me to share some of my experience with you this evening. I will basically have 2 or 3 things to share with you, and I hope that it will resonate. It will make you feel a little bit more participatory in this wonderful democracy that we are experiencing. First, I think that for Asian American to have a voice in this democracy, we have to think of ourselves as Asian American first before Vietnamese or Chinese or Korean or Taiwanese, and before Democrat or Republican. We are a minority in a minority. The population of Massachusetts, Asian Americans, is roughly 5-6%. In Boston, it's a little better. It's about almost 10%. So we have a little critical mass in Boston. My mother often asked me, not just now, but she passed away. But when I was in college, when I was in graduate school, she would often ask me, why don't you become a doctor? Why don't you try to become a doctor? Why don't you try to become an engineer instead of engaging in so-called nonsense community activities, or even worse, political activities, running for office in high school, running for office in college. And I tried to convince her that, number one, I'm not good enough to be a doctor. I'm not good enough to be an engineer. It's not for me. And number two, I truly believe that when you work for something that, or do something that you really believe in, when you feel that you can make a difference for other people, your life will be more meaningful, will be more gratifying. So over the last, I guess, almost my entire adult life, I've been involved with community things, with cultural activities, with politics. And when I came to America as a refugee many years ago, I could not speak English. I did not have a college degree. I did not know anybody. I basically, literally, fresh off the boat. I was a refugee fleeing Vietnam War, fleeing communism. All right, I was running for my life. I got basically just a shirt on my back. So when I first came to America, some American friends helping us to resettle. And I could learn English, I could get an education. But in the meantime, during that years, many of my peoples were still refugees. They were trying to, if you studied history of Vietnam War or what happened after Vietnam War, for 20, 30 years after the war had ended, millions of Vietnamese still trying to flee Vietnam. And America during that time was not very welcoming to Vietnamese refugees. Hey, after all, America just lost the war. They did not look at us as the former allies, but they look at us like a former foes, former enemies. So myself, my friends, my father, many of us felt that in order to help us to resettle better, to establish our life better, in order to help our people who were still fleeing, we need to engage with American politicians. We need to talk to this congressman, that congressman. We need to have somehow talk to the president of the US so they could understand what we were going through, what they can do for us, what we wanted to do, and most of all, what we can contribute to this wonderful place, our second home. So we had some success doing that. That's why right now in America, we have roughly about 2 million Vietnamese American. So that's the way I came from. So I learned English. I got to college. I got to, not bragging about myself, I got to Harvard. And then I worked from here and there. My experience basically saying a couple of things. One, you need to really participate. You need to get your hand dirty. Number two, it's not that difficult. We Asian, whether we came from China or from any places, we tend to work hard. We are smart, or at least our parents telling us we are smart, and people look at us as people with skill, with technical skill, but not with leadership skill. I will talk more about that. So it's it's not that difficult for us to have a very comfortable personal life if we work hard for a few years. I think your success, your story are very similar. When we first came to America, we were very reluctant to speak English. We had nobody. If we're lucky, we have few friends. But after a few years, we can achieve the American dream even better than many Americans who have been in America for generations. So that's the key thing. Our academic success, I believe, is larger than the number of our number, Asian American. We're still minority. but our purchasing power, our contribution to the US economy is larger than our share. However, we have not gotten the fair share of political power. Part of that is because of others do not want us to have a strong voice. Another big part is on our own. We try to shy away from politics. Where we come from Vietnam or China, if you get into politics, number one, your parents would not be very happy because it's dangerous. Number two, you may not make good money to raise your family. So we, culturally speaking, we've been discouraged to do that. Number three, if any of us who got into politics in the US, either appointed or elected, usually other Asian would tend to discourage that as well. In Boston, for example, I mentioned earlier, we have roughly 10% of the population is Asian American, Vietnamese, Chinese, Taiwanese, Indian, Filipino, you name it. We have it all. We have, fortunately, at least recently, in the last 10 years or so, the so-called mainstream politicians realize that Asian Americans can make a difference in their races, in their race for office. And we also make some noise so that they pay a little more attention. The councillor, Boston councillor Athlin, have had the help of one of our Chinese friends, my Chinese friend, Melissa Low, been working, helping him. The mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh, also have a Chinese liaison in Chinatown, Vietnamese liaison in Dorchester, and Michelle Wu, who may become the next mayor of Boston, is from Taiwan. So we began to participate. The more we participate, the better, not just for us, but also for the whole city, for the whole state, because I firmly believe that we have a lot to offer. We have a lot to offer. I think that's one thing we have to remind ourselves. Even though I speak English with an accent, but I think with an accent. And each of us, in addition to have a very good education, we have our cultural and many other experience to make this place really a better home for all of us. So I think we have to be confident and believe in ourselves that we can help, we can live on, we just like high tide, a good tide, with ocean tide, we can live on boat. But to do that, let me take a step back. The reason that smart politicians began to pay more attention to Asians is that even though we are minority, but we tend to concentrate in certain area. In Boston, we're Boston Chinatown. That's where a lot of Chinese Americans who have made a home there. So at every single election in the city, whether it's the mayor or state rep or senator rep in that area, they would come and talk to our Chinese community in Chinatown. Or they would go to Dorchester and talk to Vietnamese community. So we are small, but we tend to concentrate. So our vote can make a difference. We may not be able to be king, but we can be the kingmaker. And also with the, I guess, the courage of people like Michelle Wu and others, the Asian American who have run for office, that also remind the mainstream politician that, hey, if we don't listen to these Asian American, maybe they may run against us. That's not good. So we have to keep that in mind. And also, I often, before I say this, let me emphasize that what I'm sharing with you is my personal view. I don't represent the state government or the governor. It's my personal view. I think in the US system, it's not too expensive or too difficult for any group to have access or to have influence with our elected leaders. Every 2 years, there are elections, and politicians need vote and money. We have votes in certain communities, but our money can talk a lot louder than our vote. So therefore, if we run for office, if we vote, and if we donate monies to our choices of politicians, our voice can be heard. And another more also very effective way for us to be heard is to work, to volunteer for political campaign, whether it's a local election, a city councilor election, a mayor election, a governor election, or a presidential election. Any election, any candidate that you like, if you volunteer to work for them, that's a very, very easy way to have access directly to the politician. I also feel that life is long, and in our Asian culture, we tend to have more patience than others, right? So a local elected city councilor that we have today, 5 years from now, he or she may become the mayor or become the governor. And maybe 10 years from now, he or she may become a US senator, a US congressman, or even the president. And for us living in Massachusetts, I feel that almost every politician in Massachusetts have the ambition to become the US president down the road. So if all of us let these local politicians know of our potential, know of our talent, know of our wish, our desire, then they will pay attention. The last thing I'd like to share with you is this, right? The Asians, we also tend to be very polite. We don't ask. We just say, oh, if you do this, that's nice, right? We to be very polite. We have to ask very specifically. This is what our community wants. If you do this for us, we will rally our community behind you to support you. And if we do that all the time, for a long time, we build up our own credibility. The reason that Governor Baker hired me is not that I'm good, but I have been involved with him. I've been supporting him for 20 plus years. He and I worked together under Governor Bill Well 25 years ago. And when he first ran for office, I supported him. He lost. He ran again. I support him again. he won. So it's a relationship, and we have to build up that relationship. And one more thing I'd like to share with you. It's not right. Yeah. Being Asian American, we have certain advantages, but we also have some disadvantages. People don't look at us as leadership type, executive type, number one. And number two, they also look at us not as real American. America was built also partly because of Chinese. Chinese built the transcontinental railroad from East Coast to West Coast. It's just Chinese, right? But they never recognize that, right? We've been here longer than a lot of other immigrant groups, but we still look as outsider. So we need to overcome that as well. And with the current international relationship, that makes it even more difficult for all of us. So, but the bottom line here is, if we want to have a voice for our community, if we want to influence American policies toward our homeland, our first homeland, we need to learn from the Jewish American community. They always involve politics. They always vote. They always donate money to candidate, and they also run for office. So we need to learn from that wonderful experience of our Jewish friends, so we can have our voice and we can make this place a much better home for all of us. I promise I will talk too much, so I will stop here, and I would love to answer any question you may have. Any question at all, I don't mind.
Thanks very much, Nam. I really appreciate it. I think it's a very inspiring personal experience, and I do really appreciate that you gave us very, very practical tips. That's very to the heart of our question: how to elevate, Asian Americans' political power. If I could just summarize, I think you have given us some very quick tips: vote, donate, voluntarily, right? Doing volunteer work. And don't mind start small, right? You could support a city councilor. You don't need to support a mayor for now. You don't need to support a governor for now. So start small and then just keep doing things. Those are the things that you have been given us. To follow up on that, as you mentioned, there are certain stereotypes of Asian American. Not a lot of Asians pursue a political career like you. We have a huge community of corporate Asian Americans who are, just trying to climb the corporate ladder. How could someone who's in that big corporate environment insert some of the political influences and help the broad community as well, if they choose not to particularly pursue a political career?
That's an excellent question, I used to work for a very large corporation, Bank of America. It used to be in Boston. Bank Boston got bought by Bank of America. Mm-hmm. Even when I was a banker, I was able to use the resource of the bank to help our community, especially large corporation. Many corporations have community philanthropic programs. They want to be good corporate citizen. So as long as we keep in our mind that we should try to do something for our community, it doesn't matter where we work, it doesn't matter where you work, big corporation, small corporation, you still be able to help the community. The corporation may have foundation, the corporation may have volunteering program, Every year they would have a community day, so they encourage their employees to get into the community to do volunteer work. So we could steer those cooperation philanthropy activities into our communities. And the key is relationship. If we could establish, and for us, Asian is nature. Everything is based on relationship. So we can easily convince our co-worker, our corporate leaders to pay attention to our community. We can do it if we want to do it, basically. And big corporation, small corporation, that's one thing that I learned. It took me quite a while to learn that I can use the resources of my big corporation, big companies to help our community. But most of them do have programs, and they do encourage us to get involved.
Great. Another follow-up question: when you start your talk, one thing that really resonates with me was you mentioned that we need to think of us as Asian American first before we even think about us as Chinese, Vietnamese, Philippines, all that. I think that resonates with me, but I do also wanted to highlight sometimes when people talk about Asian American, sometimes it masks the diverse nature within that ethnic groups. And when I say diverse, the diversity, it's not only the origin, the country of origin, but also diverse opinions. When we are talking about having Asian Americans' voice heard, how would you give us some advice or insights on reconciling when there's diversity in terms of voice or interests within these ethnic groups?
I think one of the basic principle of democracy is you have to respect the voice of minority, not majority. Majority always rule. It doesn't matter where we are. But in a true democracy, we have to respect the minority voice. And because of our community is so diverse, even in my little old Vietnamese community, we have people who support Biden, people who support Trump, and they can almost like kill each other. So I often try to remind me and others that number one, you have to respect the voices of others. Number two, we can disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. Governor Baker often shared with us that when he was growing up in his old household, his father is a Republican. He was the Assistant Secretary of Transportation for President Nixon. But his mom, who passed away a couple of years ago, his mother was a Democrat. So at dinner tables, they would often exchange ideas. They would clash, and he would observe and learn. Many people that we interact regularly, at least used to feel that way. It requires all of us, each of us, to be respectful of others, to be mindful that we are different. However, if we could be civil with each other, if we could just to be nice with each other, and then I think we can go a long way in build up our Asian American voice coalition. In my Vietnamese community, us would criticize ourselves. Oh, we are so divisive. we not like the Chinese, we not like the Japanese. They always united, and I would tell them that we're not, number one, we're not divisive. We have different opinion. And number two, every community also has very diverse opinions in each of their own community. So there's no such thing as united voice or one voice. However, for us to have influence, more influence in each election, if we could vote as a bloc for certain policy, for certain candidate, even though we know for sure that that candidate is not perfect. But if we can focus on certain things that we can agree with, and then I think we would have a much more influence on whatever they deal with Asia.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I actually also just remembered, I think a couple of months ago, there was one voice, you know, when there is this increasing racial inequality observed in this country. And certainly after the outbreak of COVID-19, there was some discriminative actions towards Asian Americans. Mm-hmm. There was one voice that says, it is perhaps the time for Asian Americans to go above and beyond and prove our Americanness, to be integrated to the society, mm-hmm. to fight against the discrimination, to protect ourselves. Would you agree with that voice? Do you think that showing Americanness, how do you reconcile showing Americanness as an Asian American versus, you know, keeping our identity as Asian American? How do you reconcile the two?
I remember Andrew Yang, who ran for the US presidency, and he was an inspiration for many of us. He helped the so-called mainstream American to look at Asian a little differently. So I'm very grateful for his candidacy. However, I was quite disappointed when he said that, I think he wrote an op-ed piece, just like you said, Grace, that we had to prove to show to American that we are American. I think that's very, very unfortunate. I think even though Asian American are diverse, but there are certain things, certain causes that we could rally around. And that is one thing. We have to tell or remind Americans that we have as much claim to America, if not more, than any other ethnic group. I mentioned earlier that Chinese built the railroad. We have contributed a lot to this country. And the so-called Native Americans, there are a lot of anthropological evidence to prove that they are Asian as well. So if we look at that, we have as much claim to being Americans as any other group. So we need to do that unfortunately, every single day to remind people of that. So we don't need to prove that we are American. We are Americans because of what we have contributed to this country, because what we have built this country even before there's a country called United States of America. So we have to remind ourselves and remind others of that. And number two, another cause is that even though we have every right to be as American as others, but we have been more or less pushed aside. Right? One thing that really irritate me whenever I attended or read a report about diversity of America, about people of colors, about even the US Census. And many think tanks, many foundations, many agencies talking about the number of Black American, the number of Latino, the number of Hispanic. And that's it. Nowhere they would mention Asian American, even though now we begin to have a very, we have a critical mass. We are big enough. So because of that, we have to remind people. And the best way to remind people is by actively engage in politics. When you get in politics, you have so many open platforms. And just by walking around in the State House, for example, if they see more Asian walking in the State House, they will think twice before they assume that we are just a security guard or a computer technician. Just to share with you a little personal experience, right? In Massachusetts State House, recently, fortunately, we have, I think, 5 or 6 Asian American who have been elected as state representative and state senator, Chinese, Vietnamese, Cambodian, but still only about 5 or 6. I am not elected, but often when I walk into the State House, the people there would mix up me, would confuse me with other Asian American who in the State House. We all look alike to some extent because there are not many of us in there, so they couldn't really distinguish. So the more of us being around, the better. So for us, if we really want to prove to others that we are American, right? I firmly believe that the best way to do that is get involved in politics. Volunteer, run for office, donate money, vote. We can do all of those, or we can do 1 or 2 of those things. And the more of us can do, the better for the whole community.
Mm-hmm. I think you actually already give a good example of having some Asian American representation in the State House can even make a difference. Just by the appearance can make a difference. In your life, do you have any examples of having Asian American in the government actually really made a difference to this group, to Asian Americans? Can you think about any examples?
Definitely, right? I mentioned earlier that when we first came to America, there were only a handful of Vietnamese in America 40 plus years ago. But for some of us, by just talking to the politician, it helped to bring more refugees, to rescue more refugees, as well as to have social program to help many of us. And in California, for example, right? In California, right, we have a good size of Asian community. They often have or they propose policies that basically excluded Asian. And our Asian leaders there, our Asian community there, many times have been able to defeat those unenlightened, discriminatory policy. In Massachusetts, State Rep Taki Chan, who has been in the State House for a number of years, over the last few years, he recognized that Asian American, he knows himself, he's the Asian American, is very diverse. So if all the policymaker lump every Asian into one thing, then it would not be very good policy because we are different. So he proposed a bill to disaggregate the numbers of Asian. So we have, for example, now we know there are X number of Vietnamese, X number of Cambodians, X number of Chinese, and in the census, we need to pull those numbers out and try to see which group need what. There, so the government policy can use government resources to target those numbers to help them more effectively. Just like in the past, they just say people of color, and even now they mean people of color is black. Or minority means black, but no, minority means black. It means Latino. It means Asian. It means Native American. So by having our Asian voice in the room, it will help our community here, as well as to help our relationship with our homeland, with China, with Vietnam, regarding trade policy, regarding the people-to-people relationship. And there's nothing secret about it. Every group, every ethnic group has done that over the course of America history. We don't need to invent the wheel, we just need to learn from our friends, from the people around us, and then we'll be more effective agent of change for the better for all of us.
Great. Do you mind sharing with us one of your most memorable moment of your political life? Whether it's because of a hard-earned success or it's because something a significant challenge that you have to overcome. And what makes it memorable for you?
I often say that I still don't know what to do when I grow up because I keep changing my job, changing my direction. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I have so many memorable experience. Let me just show you a couple of things that just popped into my head. In my last job, I represent the state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in the diplomatic circles. So I would represent the governor in many national days celebration. And often when I walk into the room, all the so-called big cheeses, big powerful people would automatically assume that I represent some countries in Asia, not Massachusetts. So I always say with a smile that, no, I represent the governor. And so they would say, which governor? I said, Governor Baker. But there's one particular event. It's been more interesting. Hong Kong have a big event that invite all business over here. And the head of the Hong Kong delegation is a British guy. And I am the head of Massachusetts, supposed to be white, and I don't look white. So when we go there, people really, very confused. How come a British guy represent Hong Kong? And how come an Asian guy represent Massachusetts? So it's kind of fun. That also is, I use that as a reminder and also is an icebreaker to let people know that, hey, we Asian, we can do almost anything, including to be the face of so-called Caucasian community. So I always remember that. But the highlight, and I keep saying that if you ask anybody else, I said the most memorable memory I have over the last many years is my meeting with the Dalai Lama from Tibet. He's very humble, very kind, and very enlightened person. I feel blessed to get a chance to talk with him in person.
Good. We've talked a lot about, elevating Asian American political power. Maybe it's time for me to pivot just a little bit away and talk a little bit about the economic. Because I know you've long oversaw, the international business, the film industry, the tourism industry. I'm sure you have a lot to share with us on the economy as well. So we're still in the thick of this pandemic. And we've seen a lot of cities gradually losing its active lives. Massachusetts is known for its education, healthcare, innovation, but we're also having a lot of challenges right now. There are a lot of universities exploring virtual learning, for example. Therefore, there's no longer all these tourism and students coming to the States. There are a lot of companies exploring permanent work from home options as well. So it could potentially make it a little bit harder to retain talents and to grow the economy. I wanted to hear a little bit about your thoughts. Maybe you can help us envision a little bit the life or the economy post-pandemic. Do you think that Massachusetts risks losing some of its core competence because of some of the structural shifts post-pandemic?
I think that's one about key concern. Like you correctly mentioned that Massachusetts economy is based on the healthcare, education, travel, tourism, film industry. Mm-hmm. And because of this pandemic, those industries have been the most suffer. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it dragged us down. Right? Mm-hmm. Number one. Number two, Governor Baker always says that Massachusetts is a welcoming state. We welcome people, talents from all over the world. And we have a lot of talented, diverse people in Massachusetts, including us. So I have no doubt that we will recover quite nicely in the near future. Once we have a vaccine, once we have a treatment, and then because we suffer a lot, we will pick up quite nicely as well. And we all, I think most of us, if not all of us, know that the most promising vaccine of COVID is being developed by Massachusetts local companies, Moderna, and a few others. And I think I don't know a lot about Chinese language, right? But people keep telling me that in Chinese, the word risks also have the opportunities inside in there. Mm-hmm. And we learned a lot through this crisis. The state have had many initiatives to help us to deal with it better. Mm-hmm. One of the initiative I'd like to share with you is regarding the manufacturing of personal protection equipment, PPE. Mm. The state give out grant to any manufacturers, big or small, that can ship or create new products that provide better protection for for our frontline worker, for our healthcare worker, for our residents. And that initiative have had a lot of good results. So we are confident that soon we will be one of the top, if not the top state of America regarding innovation, economy, better, and anything that you like to mention, we will be back on top.
Great. Perhaps I have a little bit of time for just one last question. I know we're running a little bit short on time right now, but right now it's all eyes on the election. We have 5 days before we know who the next president is. Can you share with us a little bit about how do you think election results might impact the broad economy, U.S., and maybe Massachusetts as well, if any?
Well, that's a very, very good but difficult question. Often, from what I've seen, every president would claim more than they deserve about how they improve the economy. The U.S. economy is large. Any president cannot change it overnight, number one. And number two, also every president also would be blamed more than they deserve if the economy goes south. The U.S. economy is very resilient, very diverse. And we've seen that during the last 20 years or 10 years. It's up and down, but we tend to recover faster than most of other economies. So I think if President Trump continue, our economy will recover. If Mr. Biden become president, our economy also will recover because there are many other factors in place. It's not just the president's policy.
Great. Awesome. I think we're just 1 minute left to our event tonight. So I just wanted to end the event by saying a big thank you to Mr. Pham. Really, really appreciate your time. I know it's extremely busy for you at this time of the year. So thank you so much for spending the night with us and sharing so many practical tips as well as inspirational personal stories and personal experience with us. I think to conclude tonight, we Asian Americans, and actually, frankly, everyone, Americans, any other minorities, need to stand in solidarity and need to do our parts to participate and to contribute and to make our society and communities much better. So I don't want to say goodbye. Maybe I just end the session by saying, until next time, see ya.
Until next time, yes, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure, a real pleasure for me to share so my thought with you all. I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and let's go and vote if you haven't.
Great, thanks very much for the reminder, and good night, everyone. See ya.
Thank you, Nam. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ben. Have a good night. See you soon.
Appreciate it. See you soon.
Yeah,
bye. Definitely. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nam. Great talk. Thank you.
Thank you.